The first sting came with a smile. At a rooftop brunch in downtown Seattle, my mother raised her champagne glass, the city skyline flashing behind her like shattered crystal. She leaned in close enough that only I could hear. "Marin," she said, voice dipped in sugar and venom. "You're only here because pity keeps you on the list." Pity stretches farther than merit. The table erupted in laughter. I didn't. I simply stirred my black coffee, steady as stone, and thought, maybe pity has an expiration date. My name is Marin Cole. I'm 33 years old, a principal engineer at a cybersecurity firm in Bellevue, Washington. I spend my days building systems designed to stop thieves from stealing digital gold, banking networks, encrypted vaults, entire lifelines of finance. In the office, people know me as sharp, dependable, even brilliant. At home, though, I was never enough. I grew up far from here, in Fairfield, Connecticut, inside a 5-bedroom colonial with a glass atrium that sparkled in the sun and a heated pool that shimmered like a jewel. To neighbors, we looked like the perfect American family. Wealth, beauty, influence. But inside those white-painted walls, affection was rationed, and the air was thick with judgment. My father, Richard, a real estate mogul, lived for his phone and his deals. My mother, Elaine, was a former Virginia pageant queen who measured people by their table manners and designer labels. And my younger brother, Dane, he was their son. Even when he struck out in Little League, he was showered with applause. Me? I was the invisible one. I earned straight A's, built my first computer at 12, won regional coding tournaments, and later, a scholarship to Stanford. Yet when I stood on stage giving a commencement speech, my father scrolled through emails, and my mother whispered that my dress looked like it came from a bargain rack. Their words pressed against me like a weight I couldn't shake. Only my grandmother, Elise, treated me as if my existence itself was enough. At the family's Orcas Island beach house, she and I would sit for hours in the cedar-scented library, her favorite room. "This is yours, Marin," she'd tell me, smoothing the old leather spines. "Not the house, not the money. This place, these books, this silence, it belongs to you." She was the only one who gave me something that wasn't conditional. Years later, when she passed, I inherited a small share of that house. My parents brushed it off as a legal technicality. I swallowed the slight, like I always did, and returned to my own quiet life. I had carved out a safe space in a 2-bedroom loft with steel beams and floor-to-ceiling windows, where friends like Sophia and Jordan came over for wine and late-night conversations. In that circle, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. Still, I couldn't quite cut ties. My father had asked me years ago to digitize the family's accounts and set up cybersecurity protections. I built everything: password vaults, smart locks, layered authentication. They called it my little computer hobby, never acknowledging that I had become the invisible architect of their financial empire. Then, just weeks before that rooftop brunch, while running a routine security audit, I noticed something off. A transfer had gone through. 7,500 shares of my startup equity moved into a Spokane shell company. The digital signature looked exactly like mine, down to the last pixel. But I hadn't touched it. The notary stamp on the file? It belonged to one of my father's closest golf partners. I closed the folder with shaking hands. But later that night, as I backed up the data, something new flickered across my screen. A hidden audio file labeled, "For Marin, Elise." I pressed play. My grandmother's voice, fragile but unwavering, whispered, "If they ever try to take what's yours, look deeper. My secret will protect you." And in that moment, the smirk over champagne felt less like cruelty and more like a signal. The question that haunted me was chilling. What exactly had Grandma left for me to find? Before I go on, if you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Hit subscribe and stay tuned to hear how I finally stood up to the family who erased me for years. I wonder how far this story will travel, and who else knows what it feels like to be dismissed by the very people meant to love you. After that rooftop brunch, I went home with my mother's words echoing in my skull like a taunt I couldn't silence. You're only here because pity keeps you on the list. It played over and over while I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the soft hum of servers and the glow of code on my screen. I told myself I'd just check the family systems one last time. After all, I was planning to step away soon, hand over the admin rights, and finally cut that tether. But habit, and maybe something sharper, like instinct, pulled me in. I logged into the master dashboard I had built years earlier. Every account, every property deed, every trust fund, every credit line was connected there. At first, everything looked normal. Rent payments for the condos, utility bills for the downtown office, automatic transfers between checking accounts. But then I saw it. Withdrawals I hadn't authorized. Not once, not twice, but again and again. $78,000 drained in just 2 months, always in chunks of $6,500 or $7,800, always from ATMs scattered around the Tulalip Resort Casino. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Dane, my younger brother, with his trembling hands at brunch, his constant excuses about business expenses and temporary cash flow. I had chalked it up to his messy divorce, the child support, the lifestyle he could never actually afford. But this wasn't mismanagement. This was gambling. And not small stakes poker nights either. This was addiction, bleeding through our family's money. My stomach tightened. I thought of the mortgage drafts I'd automated, the security checks I performed for their accounts at 2 a.m. after coding all day for clients who actually respected me. I'd been propping up their image for years, while they mocked me as the difficult daughter. And now Dane had stolen from me. I zoomed into the transaction history, cross-referencing access logs. The withdrawals weren't just from his account. They had been processed using my administrator credentials. My secure digital signature, the one only I should control, was stamped on each transfer. But I never touched those requests. My mind spun through possibilities. Had I been hacked? No, my architecture was built like a fortress. Unless someone on the inside had found a way in. Someone with access to my devices. Someone who knew exactly how to make me look guilty if the withdrawals came under scrutiny. The room felt colder. I remembered the voice in the secret audio file. Grandma Elise whispering, "If they ever try to take what's yours, look deeper. My secret will protect you." What had she known? What had she seen in them years before I ever suspected? I closed the laptop, pulse hammering in my ears. Sleep was impossible, but I forced myself into bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how far my family would go. Then, just past midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Dane. "Don't drive up to the island house this week. Trust me." I sat up, the glow of the screen lighting my face. Why would he warn me off? Unless there was something up there he didn't want me to find. The ferry pulled away from the Seattle dock just after noon, its engines churning the gray water into froth. I sat by the railing, wind whipping strands of hair across my face, staring out at the islands scattered like emerald shards across Puget Sound. Every mile we moved closer to Orcas Island. The words from my mother's toast replayed in my skull. You're only here because pity keeps you on the list. By the time I drove off the ferry and wound my way up the narrow cliff roads, the sky had shifted from soft gray to a bruised shade of purple, heavy with clouds. The beach house came into view, its cedar siding weathered but still commanding, perched above the water like a sentinel. The sight of it tugged at something deep in me. Memories of afternoons reading in Grandma Elise's library, sunlight spilling through tall windows while gulls wheeled overhead. I parked my Audi near the stone steps, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Dane's warning echoed in my head. Don't drive up to the island house this week. Trust me. But trust had never been a luxury in my family. If there were secrets hidden here, I had to uncover them. The smart lock clicked open at the brush of my phone, my admin access still intact. That detail alone told me something. If they were really planning to erase me, why hadn't they revoked my codes yet? Inside, the air was cool and smelled of cedar and old paper. I pulled out my laptop, linked to the home's security system, and froze. The logs showed a gap. 22 minutes 3 nights ago, every camera on the property had gone dark. No system update, no power outage. Someone with inside access had turned them off. My throat tightened. I walked to the library. The carved oak door, once a symbol of my grandmother's love, stood ajar. Inside, the room looked almost the same. Towering shelves of worn books, the scent of leather and dust. But something was wrong. The antique writing desk, the one where Grandma Elise used to write her letters, sat open. The false bottom drawer gaped empty. I dropped to my knees, fingers searching for the tiny brass key I knew she had taped underneath the drawer years ago. Gone. Vanished. Instead, there was only a plain envelope resting in the hollow space. I slid it out, heart pounding, and opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, each one of me as a child, alone on the edge of family gatherings. In one, I sat cross-legged by the pool, while my parents posed with Dane in front of the camera. In another, I lingered in the background at Christmas, holding a book, while the rest of the family laughed around the tree. Elise had been the one behind the camera, quietly recording proof of what I had felt my entire childhood, but could never name. I had always been excluded. As I sifted through the photographs, I noticed something odd. In the corner of one picture, a faint stamp, May 14th, 1997, and just beneath it, the watermark of Hollander and Price, my grandmother's, estate attorneys. She must have deliberately stamped it before placing it in the envelope, a breadcrumb trail meant to lead me somewhere else. The realization hit me like a cold wave. Someone had stolen the key, but chosen to leave these photos behind, almost like a message. Why? To warn me? To taunt me? That's when I heard it. A soft creak of wood above me. A step. Then another. Slow. Deliberate. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. I wasn't supposed to be here. I held my breath, clutching the envelope to my chest. And then, from the top of the stairs, came the unmistakable sound of my mother's heels against the floorboards. She was here. I stood in the kitchen of the Orcas island house, the one that was supposed to be a sanctuary, and watched my mother glide in like she owned the air itself. Her heels clicked on the wood floor, each step echoing louder than the last. She set her handbag on the counter, poured herself another glass of champagne from the bottle she must have brought, and smiled as if we were in some glossy lifestyle magazine. "Marin," she said, her tone dripping with control, "the house will be listed next month. $3.2 million is what the broker says we can expect. A far better use than a dusty library no one cares about. I froze in the doorway, the envelope of photographs tucked deep into my bag. My father appeared a moment later, already glued to his phone, murmuring to someone about interest rates. He didn't even look up. "This isn't a discussion," my mother added. "It's progress. Nathan needs a proper space to host clients, and I am tired of explaining that ridiculous library to people who visit." My voice was steady, but my chest felt tight. That library was meant for me. Grandma Elise wrote it in her will. My father waved a hand, eyes still on the glowing screen. "Legal technicality. Your grandmother was sentimental." The old ache clawed up my throat, but I pressed it down. On the counter, the coffee pot was still warm. My grandmother would have wanted me calm, not reckless. So I reached for the mugs, poured the coffee, and placed one in front of my mother. She smirked, clearly mistaking my silence for surrender. But while I poured, I slid my phone from my pocket, thumb moving fast. I opened the photos, chose 3, the one stamped May 14th, 1997, and 2 others, and sent them via airdrop to Jordan, my closest friend and a corporate lawyer. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a confirmation. "Files received." Seconds later, another vibration. Jordan had already forwarded them to a journalist we both knew, a sharp investigative reporter named Hannah Wu, who had built her reputation exposing financial corruption in Seattle's tech scene. My chest pounded. This wasn't just about family secrets anymore. I returned to the table, coffee cup warm in my hand, smile fixed in place. I let my mother prattle on about guest lists and renovation themes. Dane avoided my eyes, fidgeting with his phone. My father scrolled, silent, a ghost in a tailored jacket. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Hannah. I slid it under the table and opened the message. Her words made my blood run cold. "This isn't just fraud. The shell company is already under a federal investigation. Don't move until we talk. Trust me." I nearly dropped the phone. Federal investigation? That meant my family wasn't just stealing from me. They had entangled themselves with something far bigger and far more dangerous. I glanced at my mother. She was laughing now, but it was too sharp, too forced. She excused herself from the table, her phone, already, pressed to her ear as she stepped into the hallway. I followed quietly, staying just outside the door. Her voice carried low, but I caught enough. Yes, it's still here, but listen to me carefully. Make sure she never finds the second box. The words slammed into me, harder than her toast ever could. Second box. My grip on the coffee cup tightened, the porcelain burning hot against my palms. If there was one box I didn't know about, what had my grandmother hidden inside the other? The wind off the water howled that evening as I sat in the darkened library. The photographs spread across the desk, like evidence on an investigator's table. My mind kept circling back to my mother's whisper. Make sure she never finds the second box. Second box. What could possibly be inside? And why would Grandma Elise hide it from everyone but me? I heard Dane's car crunch over the gravel outside. My heart leapt, half from dread, half from the possibility of answers. When he stepped inside, he looked smaller than I remembered. Shoulders slumped, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from either drink or sleeplessness. He froze when he saw me at the desk. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "Then tell me why you warned me," I said. I slid one of the photographs across the desk toward him. "You knew about the drawer. You knew about the key," his face drained. He sank into the chair opposite me. "Yeah, I took it, but it wasn't for me." He rubbed his temples, voice breaking. "Mom made me." She said if I didn't, she'd cut me off for good. She needed that key to get into another deposit box. Grandma had two. The second one's tied to an account Dad set up years ago. He funneled money out of the company's pension plan, $240,000, and then he moved it through me. I stared at him, stunned. Through you? He nodded miserably. They transferred $95,000 into my accounts to make it look like I'd earned it. But it was dirty money. If you expose them, I'll go down too. I'll be charged as complicit. Please, Marin, don't do this to me. I'm trying to get better. I'm going to meetings. I'm holding on by a thread. I just need time. Maybe 15,000 to settle things, to keep the collectors from coming after me. After that, I swear, I'll stand on my own. For a moment, the plea hit something tender in me. I remembered the boy who used to sneak me cookies when Mom locked me out of the dining room, the brother who once whispered apologies through the cracks in my door. But then, I looked down at the photographs again, image after image of me, isolated, sidelined, erased. My brother had been complicit, not just with the money, but with years of silence. He had accepted my role as the family scapegoat because it benefited him. So I did something many will say was heartless. I didn't offer him help. I didn't even suggest my lawyer. Instead, I leaned forward and whispered, I won't protect you this time. You knew what you were doing. Prepare yourself for the fallout. He flinched as if I had slapped him. His eyes filled, but no tears fell. He stood abruptly, muttered something about regret, and stormed out into the night. I sat in the library long after, the house groaning around me, like it remembered every secret it had held. For the first time in years, I felt the weight shift. Not lighter, not yet, but moving. Near midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Hannah, the journalist. I answered with a trembling hand. Her voice was sharp, urgent. Marin, you need to know something. One of your parents has already turned evidence, but, she paused. It's not the one you'd expect. My blood ran cold. Which one of them had broken first? The next morning, I sat across from Vanessa, my attorney, in her sleek office on the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. The city shimmered through the windows, but my eyes were fixed on the thick folder she slid across the polished table. Your instincts were right, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. The second deposit box exists, but here's what you didn't expect. Your mother is the one who opened it. She turned over copies of your father's fraudulent transfers to the federal investigators. Not your father, not Dane, Elaine. For a second I thought I'd misheard her. My mother, the same woman who had raised me on critiques sharper than knives, the same woman who once told me my laughter was too loud for polite company. She had betrayed him before she ever considered admitting fault to me. Vanessa's eyes softened. It looks like she's trying to protect herself. Throwing Richard under the bus before the feds connect her name to anything. I sank back in my chair, the leather cold against my skin. My mother, who always defended appearances, had decided that survival was worth more than loyalty. I wanted to feel vindicated, but instead I felt hollow, like a child overhearing another whispered phone call. That evening, as I packed up files on my computer, my phone buzzed. Dane. His voice was shaky, almost frantic. Marin, please. I need your help. The collectors won't wait. They want 15,000 by next week. I can't handle this. I closed my eyes. You funneled stolen pension money into your account. That's fraud. And you used my credentials to do it. Do you realize what position that puts me in? I didn't have a choice, he snapped. Mom begged me. Dad promised it was temporary, and I thought you'd cover me, like always." His voice cracked. "I've been sober for 9 months. I'm going to meetings. I swear I'm trying. Just give me this one chance." For a moment, my chest ached. 9 months sober. Those words should have filled me with hope. Maybe they did. A little. But the envelope of photos in my bag was heavier. Grandma Elise's quiet voice still echoed in my ears. "Look deeper." This was the moment. The line between enabling and saving. "I can't," I said finally. My own words shocked me with their calm finality. "I won't wire you a cent. And Dane," I swallowed, hard, my throat raw, "if you were part of those forged transfers, you need to face what you've done. I'm not your cover story anymore." He was silent for a long beat. Then he whispered, almost too low to hear, "You don't understand. If this comes out, I'm finished." "You finished yourself," I replied, voice trembling but firm. "I won't take the fall for you." That night, after he hung up, I sent a secure email to the federal investigator, attaching logs that tied the forged transfers directly to Dane's account access. My hands shook as I pressed send. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. Hours later, near midnight, a sound broke the silence outside my apartment door. A shuffle, a knock that wasn't really a knock. When I opened it, no one stood there. Only a crumpled envelope lay on the mat. I bent down, heart racing, and tore it open. Inside was Grandma Elise's original letter, her handwriting unmistakable. The very letter meant to protect me. Dane had hidden it. All along, the ballroom at Seattle's Pioneer Square Conference Center glittered with chandeliers and polished glass, but I could feel my pulse hammering harder than any spotlight above me. Rows of investors, executives, and journalists filled the seats. This was my keynote, my chance to speak about digital fraud, about protecting the vulnerable. For once, my story mattered here. I walked to the podium, heels clicking against the stage, notes trembling in my hands, though my voice remained steady. "In cybersecurity, truth is written in metadata," I began, projecting my slides onto the massive screen. "You can fake a signature. You can fake a smile. But data doesn't lie." The next slide appeared. A magnified image of a PDF's audit trail. The words glowed across the ballroom. User ID M.Cole. IP address Wilson Development Headquarters. A ripple ran through the crowd. I heard gasps, the scrape of chairs, the low hum of voices. My father was seated near the front row, jaw tightening, his phone suddenly useless in his hand. I continued, pulse thrumming, but face calm. "This digital trail shows unauthorized transfers of 7,500 shares, signed under my name. But the system records the true origin. These logins came not from me, but from a server in my father's office. Fraud leaves fingerprints, even when people think they've covered their tracks." I let the silence settle. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the voice that cut through the room. Within days, the fallout began. The real estate board suspended the $3.2 million listing for the Orcas island house, citing pending legal questions. My father's empire, propped up by leverage and deception, began to unravel. Creditors whispered, investors pulled back, deals collapsed. My mother's social circle in Seattle turned cold. Invitations stopped arriving. The woman who once glowed at charity galas now found herself standing alone at cocktail hours, ignored by the very people she had once courted. But the hardest blow came when Dane was arrested. Federal investigators traced the forged transfers back to his accounts. Shackled and pale, he pleaded during a private hearing. "I've been sober for 9 months, he said. voice breaking. I only signed her name because I thought she'd forgive me. I thought she always would. His words landed like a stone in my chest. Part of me wanted to reach for him, to shield him the way I always had. But another part, the part my grandmother had nurtured, knew better. When Vanessa asked if I wished to submit a statement in support of leniency, I shook my head. No, I said. He made his choices. If I excuse him now, I undo everything I've fought to build. Even as I said it, guilt gnawed at me. Viewers might wonder if I was too cold, too unforgiving. But I knew this. Sometimes mercy becomes another chain. Then Vanessa slid another document across the table, her expression unreadable. We retrieved the contents of the second box. It wasn't just the deed writers securing the library for you. There were letters, Marin, from your grandmother. She wrote about Elaine, about how she had once been cut out of her own family inheritance. She was disinherited. She lived her entire life trying to claw her way back into circles that had already rejected her. She repeated the wound she never healed. I felt my throat close. My mother hadn't invented cruelty out of nothing. She had inherited it, passed it on like a family heirloom. And I, for decades, had been the unwilling recipient. The courtroom was hushed when the judge finally spoke. His gavel rested on the bench, his eyes sharp on mine. "Miss Cole," he said, pausing as if weighing the weight of centuries, "do you wish to address your family before I issue my ruling?" The courtroom doors closed behind me with a final echo, but the true reckoning stretched on for months. My father, once the unshakable architect of Wilson Development, was stripped of control. Federal charges landed hardest on his longtime partner, but Richard's name was etched forever into the record. His empire didn't fall in flames. It crumbled quietly, a tower of paper collapsing under its own weight. My mother retreated into silence. Elaine, who once glittered at every charity gala, was suddenly invisible. The same friends who toasted her pearls and gowns now crossed the street to avoid her. She moved through Seattle like a ghost draped in designer fabric, forced into a retirement no one would envy. And Dane, my brother, he began serving time. His mugshot splashed across news outlets that had once celebrated him as a rising executive. At first, I braced myself for more manipulation, but the letters arrived, handwritten, stamped from prison, different in tone. They weren't apologies polished to get something in return. They were pages from rehab programs, reflections about compulsions, about the lies he told, about the sister he failed to protect. For the first time, his words carried weight, not because I wanted them to, but because they no longer tried to bend me. Meanwhile, my own life stretched wider than I had ever allowed. With Jordan and Sophia, I used the momentum of my startup success to create the Northwest Institute for Digital Ethics, a nonprofit dedicated to teaching young women the tools of cybersecurity and funding scholarships for those who had been overlooked, just as I once was. Watching a 16-year-old girl write her first line of code in a workshop we funded gave me a joy my family never understood. Joy rooted not in appearances, but in possibility. On Orcas Island, the Cedar Library was restored exactly as it had been. Elise's journals lined the shelves once again, their margins filled with her looping handwriting. Next to them, I added my own notebooks, fragments of code, sketches of systems, pieces of the mind she had nurtured. Some nights I sat at her desk, the waves slapping gently against the dock, and imagined her hand still resting lightly over mine, telling me I was enough. I created a ritual, small but grounding. For every week of independence, I slipped a novelty $30 bill into a glass jar. A silly marker, maybe, but to me, It was proof. Freedom measured, not in money lost, but in worth reclaimed. The jar grew heavier each month, clinking with reminders that I had survived, not by their pity, but by my own will. Still, there were nights when guilt crept in like a shadow, when my phone buzzed with an email from Elaine or a voicemail from Richard. I felt the old reflex tugging. Answer, explain, appease. I didn't, and every time I turned away, I repeated Elise's wisdom. Love without respect is not love. The sharpness dulled with time. What remained was not bitterness, but clarity. My best revenge wasn't in their ruin. It was in my life, lived fully, honestly, with people who chose me. Then one evening, a package arrived. The return address, Elise's attorney. Inside was a single envelope, brittle with age. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. It was my mother's handwriting. Years earlier, Elaine had written a confession, sealed away. She admitted she had been cast aside by her own wealthy parents, stripped of inheritance, exiled from circles she spent her life clawing back into. She swore in that letter she would never repeat the cruelty. And yet, she had, with me. The weight of it broke something loose inside me. Not anger, not triumph, but recognition. Her cruelty was not born in me. It was born in her wounds, unhealed and unspoken. I sat in the quiet library that night, stars pressing through the glass, and understood the lesson Elise had been trying to leave me all along. True family is not defined by obligation or bloodlines, but by respect, by love, by the courage to end what harms you. Sometimes the hardest revenge is not to retaliate, but to heal, to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace, and to build a brighter life on your own terms, where pity no longer buys you a seat at the table.